It's draft day, and this is a draft day mailbag. What's going on, guys? I hope you are excited for today. Today, we will have our draft live stream going live around 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's about an hour before the draft. Now, I wanted to get this mailbag out because I wanted to get something out this morning on draft day. I wanted to get out a final mock draft and a couple other videos, but I've put so much time into prepping for the draft, which means studying players as well as making the graphics that I do every year for the draft stream. It'll be a little bit more comprehensive than last year, so I've been caught up with that, really grinding that to make that stream as good as possible for you guys. So I wasn't really able to get out a couple of videos that I wanted to get out. Before the draft, I will tweet out my final big board and my final mock draft if any of you are interested. Those were videos that I planned on doing, but hadn't had the time to get around to. Now, this mailbag is going to be pretty short. I forgot to say on Twitter that I had posted a mailbag question prompt in the community tab, so my apologies on that. I have 12 questions that I'm going to answer, and this video is going to be roughly edited because I frankly don't really got the time right now to go through and edit this as thorough as I usually do. I usually am super perfectionist when I edit my videos. This one is not going to be like that, but I mean, you know, it is what it is. Right now, it's 6:47 in the morning. I've been up all night grinding graphics, so my energy is kind of gone, but I'll try and bring the energy for this video, so hopefully you enjoy it. Let's just jump straight into the questions. The first question we have is from John Mitzak saying, how high in the draft could we possibly buy in a trade? And I would say probably the 45 to 50 range. There are multiple teams with like 4, 5, or 6 picks in this draft. OKC has 6 because they have like a million picks in every draft, it seems like. So maybe 45 to 50, and that would be a really good range because I think there is some serious talent that would probably go in the back end of the first round or early second in a lot of other drafts that will be gettable between 45 and 50. So I would love for us to buy into that range of the draft and draft somebody in that area. You just have to look at teams with 4, 5, or 6 picks because those teams are the most likely teams to be trying to shop a second round pick and the most likely teams that we could buy a second round pick off of. The next question is from Lot Go Crazy. He says, how likely is it that we make a big trade on draft night? I mean, I don't know. I kind of want the big trade to not come on draft day, maybe a Friday, so we can have a separate huge stream for that. Or maybe it happens before the draft. If it does, we will have a live stream right away, right when some news breaks. Even if that means I get no sleep, I'll be live. I'll bring the energy. I'll bring the reaction for you guys. So definitely be on the lookout if we end up making a big trade. How likely is it that we make a big trade today? I would say about 30%. Sherweezy says, I enjoyed your video about trading for Jeremy Grant. Thank you. Glad you enjoyed it. He says, what is the most you are willing to overpay for Jeremy Grant? This question is cut off the screen. I'm not even going to edit this. What is the most you're willing to overpay for Jeremy Grant if he were made available and other options remained closed? I would probably do CJ in a first. I feel like CJ in 2 firsts is an overpay at that point for Jeremy Grant. I feel like CJ in a first is an overpay, but you got to get something done. And if it make Dame happy, then you do CJ in a first for Jeremy Grant, and maybe you get Mason Plumlee thrown in there as well. Now, I don't think Detroit would want CJ, so CJ would likely go to a third team. Hopefully you could get 2 firsts back, so that would be Detroit getting 3 first-round picks in total for Jeremy Grant and hopefully Mason Plumlee. I think that would make the team better if you could trade CJ for Jeremy Grant and Mason Plumlee. So that's sort of the package that I would overpay for. Deadly Content says, what do you think about trying to get Christian Wood and Kevin Porter Jr.? I think it's practically impossible. I don't see how we could possibly get both of those guys. Yeah, that's just, both those guys together are it's just not an option unless we're trading Dame. Maybe if we're trading Dame to Houston, but I mean, let's not trade Dame to Houston. You okay? Shaggy Squid says, I personally see Ant as the future of this franchise. Even once Dame is gone/retired, he has the potential, just needs the opportunity. Do you agree? And should we try to trade into the draft to get Kai Jones? I love his fit. Now, first off, on the Kai Jones thing, I don't see how we're going to trade into the draft lottery, and that's most likely where Kai Jones ends up going. So unless we're trading CJ for a lottery pick to take Kai Jones, which would kind of be foolish in my opinion, I don't see how we would get Kai Jones. As far as Anfernee goes, I agree with that. that. I don't necessarily think he's automatically going to be a star like some Blazer fans seem to think, but I still believe in his long-term upside, and I believe he'll take a jump next year playing under Chauncey Billups in an offensive system that suits his style of game better than the ISO-heavy system that Terry Stotts ran. Thomas Ransky says, what's a contract viewed as bad would you be willing to take on that's still a good fit for a pick in this year's draft? Example, Derrick Jones Jr. for DeAndre Jordan. I mean, if you could get the 27th pick along with DeAndre Jordan for Derrick Jones Jr., which I don't think is the case, then sure, you'd do it. Maybe Dario Saric is a bad contract now, and Phoenix has the 29th pick. Saric, of course, is injured and going to miss all of next season. He has 2 years remaining, about $9 million a year. So maybe you take on that contract, but I don't see the Suns being willing to give up the 29th pick, as well as Saric and getting off his contract only for Derrick Jones Jr. I feel like they'd want more value back because this draft is so loaded that it's going to be hard to incentivize teams to like give up bad contracts and really get into the back end of the first round that way. You might be able to move up if you're a team that already has a pick, a la the Memphis Grizzlies trading Valanciunas in 17 for the 10th pick, as well as Eric Bledsoe and Steven Adams. That sort of trade makes sense, but for the Blazers, it's going to be hard to structure a trade where they take on a bad contract and get into a portion of the draft that they otherwise couldn't just by simply buying into it. Cooper Ching says, which of these is most likely? A, CJ is traded on draft night. B, CJ is traded around the start of free agency. C, CJ is traded in a few months or around the start of the season. Or D, CJ isn't traded and starts the year with the Portland Trail Blazers. I feel like C is the least likely. I feel like B is the most likely. Let me know in chat what you guys would answer to this question. I'm curious to see what some of the answers are on this. This would have been a good poll question for Blazers Pulse, so maybe Cooper should write the questions next time, but I would say CJ is most likely to be traded around the start of free agency. King says, do you think Bradley Beal will get traded on draft night? No, I don't, because I feel like if he was going to get traded on draft night, there already would have been a report of him asking for a trade out of Washington. Go Blazers 05 says, who is the best player you think we could trade for using Derrick Jones Jr. into first? Go Blazers. Probably one of the targets on my 4 mid-tier targets trade video. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. Mateo M says, if we were to get a second round pick, would O'Shea target a guy that can help us win now or more of a long-term project? And which would you prefer? I would just prefer the best player on the board, the best value on the board. If that's a long-term project, that's fine. I feel like we shouldn't be relying on a second round draft pick to play in our rotation next year, and there's a lot of guards in this draft, and we won't really need help at the guard position, in my opinion, as long as we keep Anfernee Simons and are able to re-sign Norman Powell. So, I mean, just take the best player on the board. If that's a guy that can help you win now, great. If that's a long-term project that has a really high ceiling, awesome. Mike Posner says, assuming he continues to improve his defense and driving ability, does Ant have all-star potential as a combo guard? He's like a Jalen Green light. I don't know if I'd make the Jalen Green light comparison, but I don't know that I wouldn't make that comparison. That's an interesting comparison. I haven't really thought about that, and I'm a little bit too tired right now to actually think about that one. But, I mean, his ceiling is all-star caliber. It's not likely that he becomes an all-star, but his ceiling is definitely all-star caliber. There's a difference between the likelihood you reach your ceiling and your overall ceiling. I feel like people just look at overall ceiling and it's like, wow, this guy has the ceiling of a superstar, right? But I would rather take a guy with the ceiling of an all-star who's likely to reach his ceiling than the guy with the ceiling of a superstar that is not likely to reach his ceiling, if that makes sense. There's a likelihood factor that I feel like people ignore with that. So he has all-star potential. I don't think it's likely he becomes an all-star, though. Portland Maid says, which player in the draft do you think is going to be a bust? This is a good question. It's hard to say anybody's going to be a bust because there's so many great players in this draft, and there's no one guy that I look at and is like, yeah, everybody thinks that guy's good, and he's for sure going to suck, and he's for sure going to be a bust. There is one player I'm much lower on that a lot of people have ranked in the draft lottery, and that is Alperen Sengun. I just think he's going to be an extremely bad defender in the NBA. I feel like he has to play center, but he's undersized for that position, and he's not mobile whatsoever. And if he can't become like all-star caliber Domantas Sabonis Jokic-esque offensively, then I feel like he's not going to be a player that helps you win games at all. So that's a tough ask, asking for him to become all-star caliber offensively in order to justify his draft selection. And I mean, I don't know. Domantas Sabonis is your center. Can you really go that far into the playoffs with a center that's poor defensively? I'm not so sure. And I'm a big Sabonis fan. Obviously, he's the son of Arvydas, and he went to Gonzaga, which is my college. You know, I didn't go there, but it's who I'm a fan of. So I'm a Domantas fan, but I mean, I feel like a guy like Sengun would have to be even better than Domantas offensively to be able to help teams win games. So I have him a bit lower on my big board than a lot of other people do. Anyway, that wraps up this mailbag. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you enjoyed draft day, because if you enjoy it, that probably means that I'm enjoying it, because we probably did something good. So fingers crossed that Olshey can come through for us. I don't know if I trust an Olshey, but I mean, we'll see what happens. So stay tuned with Blazers Uprise for all, you know, if anything happens in terms of a big trade or something like that. Also follow me on Twitter at TorreyJonesYT. The channel's at Blazers Uprise YT. My co-host Eric at HoopsJock. Twitter links in the description below. Make sure to go check them out. Also, if you're not subscribed, subscribe so you don't miss our draft stream and you don't miss the free agency stream. Anyway, that's a wrap for this video. We'll see you later today on that NBA draft stream. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.